Well, welcome. We've got a fun idea here today. I have made a trait for every one of the 9 classes in the game. Just for fun, really. Just because I'm feeling a little bit inspired, a little bit creative about the state of the game and the game's combat balance. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of us have thought about interesting things we'd like to see with the balance. Usually nowadays, people, they're just talking about elite specializations, like over with Heart of Thorns and Pure, and now moving into End of Dragons. You know, everyone wants to talk about what the elite specs could be and this and that. But I still think there's amazing stuff possible with the core classes. And so I decided to design just a couple of traits and show you guys what I think. In fact, for some of these classes, I've made more than one trait, but very minimal. I really do think with just like one tweak, one new addition, suddenly a lot of fun stuff can come forward, because I am still a big believer that for all the toys and interesting stuff each of the professions can use, there are underrepresented elements, and I want to bring them out. So, yeah, for fun, and we'll see what you guys think. Maybe you can design some of your own traits down in the comments. So let me be clear about my motivation when it comes to making these traits. What I really want to do is take stuff that are in the classes that isn't fun enough right now, or builds, playstyles, and make them more worthwhile. And the bigger the general idea, the more popular the concept, yet it remains weak, the more likely it is that I kind of want to fix it. And again, nothing to do with elite specialization stuff here. Usually as well, what I'm really looking at is stuff I was excited about at launch, or that I imagine a lot of players come into Guild Wars 2 to try out, and then just never ended up really as good as it could be. And so, okay, what that means is I'm really not talking about raids here, guys. All right, look, a lot of people just look at balance changes, and if they see if the change doesn't affect like a DPS benchmark, then they don't care. We'll try to get out of the headspace. I want to look at builds that are applicable for most players and would be fun in general open world scenarios. Oh, and also, I'm trying not to give explicit numbers here. I really don't see the point, like it's not productive. What we're really doing is talking about the concepts, and what the exact number is that would be balanced in the end. Let's just imagine that we're going to get it right, you know? These aren't real anyway. And the other thing, I suppose, too, is PvP and World versus Worlds. And sorry to these guys, I'm not really thinking about these new traits as far as these are concerned too much right now. You know, they can game mode split balance now, so let's just assume that if something I'm about to say is a really unfun interaction, that it would just be nerfed to oblivion. It wouldn't be in World vs. World, or it wouldn't be in PvP if it's unfun. Hey, maybe some of this stuff would be fun to play as and against. That would be kind of up to you guys. So let's do it. I'm going to start off with Engineer here. As you can see, we're in the Aether Blade area. I'll actually move away from some of the cogs and shooting flames there. They're quite loud. I didn't think that they would be so much. And let's see what we got. Now, first of all, well, what's really underutilized on Engineer? What do I think a lot of people come into the game and try and end up a little bit disappointed in? Well, of course, it's turrets. And in fact, it's not just turrets, but even the idea of interacting with turrets more than just dropping them, I think is really shoddy in Guild Wars now. You guys might not know this, but on the toolkit, did you know that as you auto-attack with the toolkit, it repairs turrets? It specifically says that it repairs turret 5% every hit. So if we aggro this boar, this is going to be really hard to deal with. If the boar can hit the turret... Oh, he charged past it. He didn't manage to. Maybe we can bait it into hitting it in the right place here. There you go. He hit the turret. It bled for a second, but it's still at 100%. Anyway, when I auto-attack, I will actually manage to heal it up. So, I like this interaction. This is actually kind of based on Team Fortress 2, I guess. But the devs kind of gutted turrets. They actually did what was, in my opinion, a horrendous change years ago when they refined the already existing turret trait, experimental turrets, which means that when you place a turret, a little bubble appears around it and they pulse out boons. Turrets are difficult to work with because bots like turrets. So ArenaNet needs whatever turret gameplay exists to be somewhat active. Otherwise, like if you just buff turrets out the ass and make them really, really, really dangerous and deadly, then yeah, people get to live that fantasy of dropping a rocket turret down and all that kind of stuff. But now bots are running rampant. So whatever that you design here, you have to be very careful about. This is what I've gone with. Now, I've made this with that Shaman's Tooltip Generator. It's an amazing tool, just as so much of what Shaman makes is amazing. Someone remind me to put a link in the description. I've got a new trait. It's going to be in the Inventions line, where you see the other turret stuff at the moment. It's called Volatile Turrets. I do imagine this is Grandmaster. I don't know what it'd be replacing necessarily. And so it says, turrets deal more damage after overcharging. And so let's just quickly remind ourselves, what is overcharging? Well, it used to be that after you placed a turret down, it would flip over to a new skill that wasn't detonate. it was overcharge. And in fact, you can see here that when I'm mousing over, you can see a third skill. You've got the net turret, and you also have electrified net. Overcharge your turret to fight an electrified net that immobilizes and stuns. You used to be able to do that on demand, and it was actually another layer of play to being a turreteer. And nowadays, you don't get that control anymore. They removed that ability, and instead, turrets automatically overcharge once, ever, after you place them. So watch here. Watch the rifle turret when I drop it down. You'll see after a few seconds, you see that little animation on it right now? That means it's overcharged right now. So currently, it's using automatic fire, which increases its rate of attack and has all these cool things. Like every single turret has a nice overcharge. Hill turrets is here. They all had good icons too. But you don't really get that control anymore, and because they only overcharge once now when you place them, that's ArenaNet's way of saying you've got to be a bit more active. So now, if I want to see the overcharge again, I've got to detonate or pick the thing up and then place it again. I'll see the overcharge. So what my trait is going to try and do is bring the overcharge back into the game. Going over again, turrets deal more damage after overcharging, so you can buff their strength, but it requires players are actively playing and using the overcharge. And it says you may now overcharge your turrets on demand, and overcharge abilities have ammunition. The downside, you lose the ability to remotely detonate your turrets, and overcharge skills deal variable damage back to their turret. So why have I designed it this way? Well, what I'm basically saying is when we drop, say, our net turret here, it flips over currently to detonate. I'm saying don't flip over to detonate anymore. Flip over to overcharge so that I can control overcharging. What I can't do anymore is run over here and blow it up and get the blast combo and so on. The only way I can get rid of my turret is either to let it die or to walk over and actually physically pick it up. This idea of physically picking up turrets, I really enjoy too. And I feel like hasn't really been emphasized enough. Now that you can't remotely detonate anymore, I actually think that's probably a more fun experience. You wouldn't be able to do it with the supply crate for what it's worth. So yeah, I like that idea. Give me my overcharges back. And here's a funny thing. Since this change where they got rid of overcharges and sort of messed with things, they've introduced a new idea of skill, and that's ammunition abilities, right? Where they continue charging up. They didn't exist back in the day. Now they do, and I actually think ammunition skills, that format, are a great way of buffing a ton of stuff in the game. And turrets are one of them. You're going to see many times I look at ammunition skills here in this video. So what I'm saying is if we drop the flame turret, this would swap over to smoke screen, and I'd have ammunition on smoke screen. And so I can, you know, maybe start with 2 charges, and I can expend them both, or whatever, pace them out as they slowly come out. Maybe you wouldn't even have them recharge, and you only have a number of casts you can get before you have to destroy it. So that final little thing I said there as well, overcharge skills deal variable damage back to the turret. That's my anti-bot measure. And it's also a way of buffing this toolkit. What I like the idea of is that every time you hit overcharge, you're gambling on the volatile turret. It might hurt itself. Maybe it only does a little bit of damage to itself. Maybe it does a ton of damage to itself. And to stop it from breaking, you've got to be hammering away on the toolkit. And now you're doing the Team Fortress 2 thing that the devs had always, like, clearly been going for, where I can stand around spamming my overcharges, trying to balance and compensate how much I can actually heal these turrets up. I think that could work super well, and you would actually invent a playstyle here, something that's been purportedly in the game but has never quite manifested, with the addition of just one trait. And then, yeah, you got your turret gameplay, which, again, I think a lot of players come in, they pick engineer, they want the turret gameplay. It's not satisfying at the moment, and I sort of think with volatile turrets, I could make it pretty satisfying. The bots would be having a tough time because the damage coming back on the turrets after each overcharge would be variable. Maybe sometimes they blow up, maybe sometimes they don't. You'd ideally need an actual brain to react to that stuff. And the fact they would take damage on overcharge is important for another reason too. If you're getting rid of remote detonate, there might be weird situations where engineers can't get their turrets back, so you allow them to blow them up in a roundabout way with the overcharges. I actually think it's that last little issue there I mentioned that scared the devs off of doing anything more interesting last time they patched this. And we can do better than that. Turrets with actual mechanics. Funnily enough, engineer was one of those professions that I did 2 traits for. So here's the other idea. It's a lot more simple. It's called the possibility matrix. I imagine that this would be in the tools line. And so what it is whenever, and I would imagine this is Grandmaster, whenever you activate a core engineer tool belt skill, it is shuffled to a new one. So what I'm trying to say is I don't want this affecting Function Gyro, and I don't necessarily want this affecting Enter Hollow Forge or whatever. But what I'm saying here is that if I use Net Attack on this boar, what will happen is that will now swap to another random tool belt skill of that category. So it's not going to become like the heal one, or it's not going to become an elite one, but it can become another utility skill based tool belt skill. And so what I'm constantly doing now is improvising and seeing what new stuff appears. There's a lot of really interesting weird tool belt skills in the game that you just never see because they're not attached to the skill itself that you might like. And I really think that the flow here would work well. It also has the added benefit, let's turn off Hollow here, of actually creating a bit of a build for core engineers because of the way it would work on the elite slot. When you're a core engineer, you get access to med pack drop, which is pretty good, but again, is on a pretty big cooldown, and you have to be a core engineer with the supply crate. Or you get mini mower. This is awesome. You can mower morph 3 people at once. Very, very fun idea. Or you get the orbital strike, which some people will be familiar with from the trait as well. These are all really, really interesting. Now, with this proposed new trait, what that would mean is if you're a core engineer taking the trait, when I hit orbital strike, it will shuffle to mini mower or to the med pack drop. And so there's a little bit of randomness there, but now I'm actually getting to use all of these abilities, and suddenly I think you could get some real builds out of it. I think that would actually be really, really fun. The obvious downside is that you're kind of bypassing cooldowns here. So what I would say to compensate for that and to affect that is that the shuffled abilities, when it shuffles, it's going to start on a 20-second cooldown. So, you know, if I use Regenerating Mist and it's going to quickly swap over to Toss Elixir H for me, I have to wait 20 seconds before I can use the Elixir H. And maybe this in general does give you a buff, but depending on what the role is, it might be good, it might be bad. You know, maybe the number itself needs to be high. Like I say, we don't have to worry about the exact balance, just the idea. And this would be a combat-only trait, obviously, as well. The second you leave combat, your stuff should get reset. I don't know how that would be on a technical level to implement, but again, I think that could be really fun. And to those of you sort of sneering at the randomness element, don't forget that was always meant to be a part of Engineer. Look at the way that Elixirs worked at launch, and I know they kind of refined some of that out, so maybe you've got a point, but I think it's a fun idea for a trait. Let's move on to another class now. We've been on NG for a long time, and here what I guess I'll do is I'll pick all the classes I've made multiple traits for first, and we'll go to the ones I guess less inspiration for later. So let's run on in next. I've got Death Magic traits for the Necromancer. I don't know, man. I love Death Magic. What can I say? And I think that the line itself right now is really kind of boring and odd. They've got the whole Carapace thing. What I want is more ways to customize minions. Now, minions are a weird one in the, again, I think most people who pick Necro want to play with minions. And a lot of them do. Even if they're not even that strong, you do see a ton of minion monsters running around in PvE. So maybe it's strong enough. Maybe ArenaNet doesn't need to do anything. But I think there's so much more fun you could have with the build craft here. So let's go for it. And the first thing I want to propose is this, the Undeath Shroud. Your minions gain access to the Lesser Shroud, and minions enter Shroud when you do. Okay, so on the face of it, that trait might look a bit weird. What exactly do I mean here? You'd probably need a little bit of extra text on the tooltip to fully explain. What I'm saying is that if I am, you know, a Reaper here, when I enter Reaper Shroud, I want to see all of them go into Shroud at the same time. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that they're all using Life Reap, Life Rend, Life Slash. They're still using their irregular abilities, but they can inherit whatever Shroud effects you like. I have this Grandmaster trait, Reaper's Onslaught, that gives me Ferocity and Quickness. Well, that means the minions have Ferocity and Quickness. I want it to be that while I'm in Shroud, as a Reaper, as a Death Magic Reaper, I get Quickness minions, so they're attacking a lot faster. I think that's a really, really cool idea, but not only that, if you're a Scourge, then they're pulsing little packets of Torment around as they do their thing. Now, again, I mentioned on the trait Lesser Shroud. That's why, you know, it's not as strong as the real Shroud necessarily, especially with the Scourge thing. It could be kind of nuts too quickly, I think. So you'd maybe nerf down the specific Scourge interaction if you like. You just define whatever that Lesser Shroud is. And so there's a ton of ways you can play with this. Look at, for example, on Soul Reaping, Doomfire. Shroud 1 inflicts burning on our target. Well, Maybe we don't play a quickness variant. Maybe we play a Condi variant. So now we're getting burning out of our minions where we never were before. I just think that there's so much potential. And again, anything that's too strong could be nerfed a bit. It's just such a cool way of weaving in and out of all the other specialization stuff. And even, I think, like in a PvP kind of back and forth thing, it would be an interesting experience to see a Minion-Mancer go in Shroud and know that his stuff's been turbocharged somehow, and you got to be careful of it. Think as well, like, you can make them attack faster with quickness, but what if you just want them to move quicker? What if you want them to have swiftness so they can get around because they're being incapacitated? Well, you've got other traits, right? You've got stuff like Relentless Pursuit, and you've got Speed of Shadows. Entering Shroud grants swiftness, so that means your minions would get swiftness. I could talk for ages and ages and ages about this, but I think it's a very elegant, fun idea for a trait that they could do amazing things with. And here in editing, just a little thing I mocked up. For those with limited imagination on an interesting example of a nerf, you could have when you leave Shroud, the minions all die. Would have a weird synergy with Death Nova too. Another idea for a death magic trait here, Lich Blood. So this, I kind of imagine in a world where maybe they tweaked Death Nova a little bit. Death Nova being the current death magic one for minions where stuff blows up and you summon Jagged Horrors when things die. Lich Blood. Jagged and Unstable Horrors now last longer. So you can Zerg more minions out, basically. Don't forget that the Unstable Horrors are what Lich forms spawns. You get an ability, 5 creatures come out of the ground. They blow up after a little while. And your minions gain more power from might. Lich form applies pulsing might to your minions. So what do I want here? Well, just a second ago, I kind of described a way of speeding up your minions, making them move faster. Well, what about a way of strengthening your minions? Just making them hit harder. The thing is, I don't just want a trait that says, oh, they hit like a truck now. I think that's pretty lame. What I like the idea of is, okay, maybe, and this is kind of a Guild Wars 1 style thing, maybe I want to summon my minions, but instead of going all minions, I'm going to keep one of my abilities, Blood is Power. So Blood is Power is AoE mass might for everything around me. So I Blood is Power, and now I've given my minions might. And I want a trait that makes this feel really worthwhile, right? Look, the minion even took the bleeding from me on Blood is Power. What a cool interaction this is. So I want this to feel like it matters a lot. So if you look at, for example, Spite, we have this trait, Awaken the Pain. Might grants you more power and less condition damage. So might is stronger than us. I want this Lich Blood trait to be like that, but for minions. So I still have to play with build synergies. I can run pack runes or fireworks, and I can run skills like this. I still have to figure out the job of giving them might, but it's really rewarding to do it because might matters a lot for minions now. That's what I want the trait to be. And as a benefit of it, I think the Lich form should have more association with minion builds. So I like the idea of this trait also meaning while I'm in Lich form, I'm pulsing might to my minions. Lich form strips you of your spectral stuff, but not of your minions, right? So I think this should just be, if you're a Lich, your minions are hitting hard. And now, Summon Madness, which creates the Unstable Horrors. Now this is really fun and really scary as well. I really like this idea. I kind of want to be able to summon Madness twice, maybe give it ammo or something. But maybe that's just a Lich form balance idea. So yeah, that's Lich Blood, very cool. And then finally, the last death magic trait that I've got, I've called this Reanimation. And this is kind of like a swarm setup. Your minions become unstable horrors when they die. Summon an unstable horror when you enter Shroud. So, yeah, if you guys don't know, way back, the Death Shroud used to be something Necros only entered when they went down state. They never had an actual down state. They had Shroud instead and had a lot of weird interactions. One of those weird interactions was that while in Shroud, you could summon a minion. There aren't any minions in Shroud anymore. There haven't been at all. And that kind of sucks. Not even for any of the elite specializations did they do that. But the original one was this guy, actually. It was the Shadow Fiend. That's why he looks kind of Death Shroud colored, right? They're a matching pair, these two. So I kind of want to bring that back. So I think, hey, let's have a trait that gives us a minion when we enter Shroud. Let's have it as an unstable horror, because that's kind of rare. You don't see those so much. But the idea here is that, just like in Guild Wars 1, there was an enchantment called Jagged Bones. You could cast it on something, and then when it died, it would resummon itself. I really like the idea of getting something like that back. So if this bone minion dies, he gets resummoned as an unstable horror. Now, the unstable horrors are destined to blow up themselves after a few seconds, so this doesn't affect server latency and stuff like that too much, because, you know, people aren't going to have the infinite swarms. All the new minions that this trait is generating will go away soon enough. But now you can get like multiple explosions going on with Death Nova. I think it could be really, really fun to see all my unstables running around and doing things. And, you know, especially with stuff like this where I can trigger the minion to kill it, knowing that that would then create an unstable. That's fun as hell to me. So, yeah, that's just a little... That's the tip of the iceberg, I think, honestly, with the Minion Mancer buildcraft. Come on. This is so fun. They can do so much stuff. And they give us one trait in one line. ArenaNet. Man, you could fill all of this in. Next, we have Rev. I only made 2 traits for Rev. They're a lot quicker to explain. Trust me, this video is going to go a lot quicker than you think it's going to, because some of these upcoming classes I have way less to say on. But so Rev. So what I really wanted with Rev is I wanted to look at Malix. And I wanted, for the purposes of generic PvE and running around, I wanted the idea of Malix and the Demon Stance to have something to offer for power playstyles. I don't like the idea that it's only Condi that we're getting out of this. So what's a fun way that they can tool it slightly? And I was looking at the corruption line, and the top line is all Torment-oriented stuff, you know? Except then suddenly it's Diabolic Inferno, and it's not really got anything to do with Torment, and it's a bit of a weird trait in some ways. So I kind of like the idea of a Torment-oriented Grandmaster, which enables power Demon Stance. And having a power Demon Stance is kind of nice because it gives you a supplement to Shiro that isn't too defensive like Jarlis and doesn't require an elite spec either. And come on, these skills are just so cool. So here's what I came up with. Abyssal Torment. Strike your foe whenever you apply Torment to them, and it says here, importantly underneath, critical damage increase 100%, and your Torment effects have half duration. So, what do I mean by this? Well, look, I don't want to just super power creep a power build that also slaps out a ton of Torment. If you guys have never tried playing power Rev, even with some of these Torment things, like Mace, for example, and the Malix stuff, you can easily get like 20 to 30 Torment on someone without even really building for much duration. Very easily you can go that high. And obviously you don't want to do too much damage. So I'm saying nerf down the Torment duration, but whenever you inflict a new stack, I want a little slash of additional damage. Nothing major. I'm talking like a really low amount of damage. And that critical damage increase 100% is really important. You see this on some other classes, like Elementalist Electric Discharge had it for a while. The idea is it's a trait that really won't do much damage unless you have Ferocity. Ferocity will scale really hard because all your crits are worth double crits, but the base damage is very low. And what that means is if you're playing a pure Condi build, it would still make sense to take, you know, maybe Diabolic Inferno, whatever you'd want to replace. It makes sense to take something else. But if you want to play a Ferocity, Precision, and Power build, suddenly you can take this trait and it really works. So that's what I think. I don't think it needs to be lifesteal or anything like that. Just a little slash of damage so that, for example, while I'm in Embrace the Darkness and I'm pulsing out Torment, on a power build, I'm actually pulsing, you know, a little bit more out. And look at the way that Embrace the Darkness works as well. It's extra Torment after you use a skill that uses energy. So now this works for power builds too. And now look at like Mace as well. Every time Echoing Eruption lands, that would be 4 little procs of the trait each time one of those slams into someone. I'm telling you guys, it would feel really, really satisfying. And again, just make sure it's not imbalanced. And yeah, I think that's a very, very fun concept. Another thing that I really want out of Rev that I haven't been able to play with for a while is something that was there at the start of Heart of Thorns and now is gone. I guess I can actually only show you here. With Dwarf Stance, it's the hammers. So you get Vengeful Hammers, invoke hammers to circle you, and it says their number of hammers 3. So there they are. Now here's the thing. When Heart of Thorns was coming out, they had lots of different ways to get hammers, and you could like build them up. It could be like a build where in multiple places you find more hammers, and now you've got loads orbiting you. So what I actually like the idea is maybe nerfing this down to just like 2 hammers following you based on the skill alone, and give people other ways to find them, like on runes. You know, like how Hollowsmith runes give you the hollow spinny effect, a bit like this. Maybe there should be a Rev rune should change to not be about resist. Maybe it gives you another hammer or something. Anyway, here's the trait I want to go with. It's a retribution trait for Jarlis called Dwarven Wrath, and it says protection, retaliation, and stability, which are all very short, fast expiring boons. They conjure lesser vengeful hammers for their duration. And these lesser hammers provide inferior damage reduction. So currently, if you look at the actual skill itself, it's 20% reduced incoming damage, 20% reduced incoming condition damage, which is a lot of defense. So if you put the game into this more fluid place where lots of hammers can be out at once, you know, you can't have people running around with like 60-70% condition damage reduction all the time. So the trait-based ones would be a little bit weaker for damage reduction, but this idea that you've got loads of them that hit people, I think would be cool. I also think it'd be really awesome if they orbited further away from you again, which used to be how it was. They kind of pulled it in to make it a little bit more reliable, but I also think that it's lost a lot of its flavor and fun now that they're super close. It was cooler when they orbited far out and you kind of had to think about them hitting people a bit more. So yeah, I like that idea. And yeah, this would mean that anywhere where there's currently retail on Rev, you have another reason to go for it because it's giving you hammers while you have the retail on there. And that has some cool Carla synergies. That actually revitalizes a lot of weird areas of this class that I currently ignore a bit. And then stability as well. Stability similar, like here, Glaring Resolve from Invocation. Whenever you stun break, you give yourself stability. Well, if my trait was in the game, you could take Glaring Resolve and the Dwarven Wrath, and now when you stun break, you've given yourself a hammer as it's spinning around for the next 5 seconds. I think that that's a really cool idea, and then the game of stacking as many as possible, picking runes that help you keep a bit of retail higher and protection higher and stability. That could be so fun to me. Thief might be my weakest, I have to be honest. But again, on the theme of revitalizing stuff you don't often look at, I want to look at dual skills and particularly what they replace. So if you guys aren't familiar with this, when you have a main hand and an offhand equipped, so for example, do I have any templates with just regular non-two-handed stuff? That's kind of amazing. So for example, if we equip a dagger, you have this skill here on skill 3, Twisting Fangs. Now that was a super iconic Guild Wars 1 ability. But when we equip our second dagger, Twisting Fangs goes away. It becomes Death Blossom. Also a Guild Wars 1 ability. But that's because we're dagger. You know, if I turn that into a pistol, it becomes Shadow Shot. These are known as dual wields. And what it means is that that original ability, Twisting Fangs, no one ever uses and isn't a part of the game's balance because the game never encourages you to have just one weapon equipped. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, a trait that means just have one weapon? I think that's a bit too ridiculous. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am saying is let's be able to dual wield and not end up replacing that ability. Then we can have Twisting Fangs be in the game and be really strong. It's basically like giving thieves new abilities based on having a trait. So here's what I've called it, right-handed. I imagine it would be in improvisation or something. Lose access to dual wield abilities. Your non-dual wield abilities are improved. And so, yeah, then you would describe what they are. Twisting Fangs, blah, 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 repeat, a stab. And then if you wanted to, with the two-handed weapons, you could maybe do fun stuff. I don't know. You'd have to change the tooltip text there a little bit. But yeah, that's just an idea that I have. I've always wanted to see these skills be stronger. Most of them are very weak. Also, I will point out, if you are playing... The devs did do a patch a bit like this recently. If you're playing PD... After you use Shadow Strike, it does flip over into Repeater now. Repeater being the regular skill. I think they might have different balance technically, or maybe not. So maybe ArenaNet can change this a little bit and have the new Repeater be something different and then have the old Repeater be something more fun. It's kind of their call on that one. But yeah, that's what I have for Thief, just the one trait. And I think the rest of these I'll only have one trait for. My suggestion for Mesmer is actually something I think they might do in an elite specialization. There are two things that I imagine they might add to the Mesmer's repertoire. One is Chill. Chill being something that slows down skill recharge. It's very fitting for Mesmer. Mesmer hasn't really had it so far in abundance, except on Chaos Storm. You know, something very chill-oriented. I can also imagine, like, a deep sea elite specialization based on chill seems right up Mesmer's alley. So they might do that. The other thing, though, is retaliation. And again, Mesmer gets a little bit of retaliation, again, through Chaos Storm, but not much. Now, retaliation's very fitting for Mesmer too, because, you know, it's damage reflection. It's kind of like the empathy, the backfire, the visions of regret situation we had from Guild Wars 1. I love the idea of an enemy loaded with confusion attacking a Mesmer that has retaliation and getting bombed, because, you know, that's what it means to be a Mesmer. But you can't really build because there's not much retail on Mesmer at the moment. Don't forget the retaliation is actually super strong in PvE already. Like, it's much buffed compared to in the competitive formats. And confusion as well is super buffed in PvE. So here's what I want, and I'm actually kind of replacing a trait that already exists. An inspiration trait called Sympathetic Visage, based on a GW1 skill. And it's a simple idea. I'm just saying gain retaliation whenever you block with a scepter or a sword. Retaliation applied to you is stronger. So I did first just think, why not just have retaliation whenever you block? The thing is, you can spam so much Aegis on yourself through various mechanisms that I actually think that's too strong. I mean, maybe you could do that. But having it only when you block with a scepter or a sword, that feels more fun to me, and it actually encourages a little bit more sword offhand, which is something I don't find myself doing too much in general PvE. Again, like, we could talk about endgame and how often people use the swordsman and stuff. Yeah, I like the idea I'm blocking here. If you proc that, you obviously do all the regular block stuff, but now this trait procs retaliation on me. And yeah, I want the retaliation to be stronger as well. So it's already coming from a good baseline in PvE, but now it's exceptionally good. And I really want that feeling of something attacking me and just a lot of damage splashes back on them. That's Mesmer, man, and I think this could work. The current Sympathetic Visage, it's already there in Inspiration. It's not that strong, though. Here, it's Phantasms taking your Condis. Okay, it is strong, but there's also a ton of other options for Condi Cleanse in the game now. So, again, I feel like it is replaceable. And yeah, maybe it can stay at the Adept level, whatever. Guardian, I appreciate this Guardian doesn't look like much of a Guardian at the moment. I'm cleaning my bank out. Guardian is going to be another one of those situations where I'm looking back at Vanilla and Core and some of the stuff about this class that never really clicked in the way that I wanted it to. And so that's with two categories of skills. That's consecrations and wards. So here's the trait I've come up with. It's called Sanctity. Your consecrations and your wards are larger and affect more targets. Now, just to be clear, there is already a trait that says your consecrations last longer and cool down quicker. So maybe you could merge this all together. Maybe you could stack the two traits. It's your choice. In general, the devs don't like having multiple traits affecting just one class of utility skill. That's one of the reasons we have so much limited stuff on minions, for example, over on Necro. But that aside, you know, if we're bending that rule a little bit, you can imagine it how you like. But here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about skills like Sanctuary, right? Which really feel like they've fallen off over the years in some ways. I like the idea of a trait that just makes Sanctuary bigger and maybe just shields a couple more player, increases the number of allied targets. I combine it with the other traits so it lasts a good amount of time. And when I say bigger, I really mean a lot bigger. I want to summon a proper bubble that I can protect people within. Because I remember before Guild Wars 2 came out, they talked a lot about how Guardian supported its allies, and it wasn't through this like raw healing idea. If you remember, they were trying to kind of angle away from that. They wanted you to be this battlefield tactician that could control where enemies move and stuff. And with the abundance of stab and whatnot in the game, I just feel like these need to be a lot better, especially for that core, basic, regular experience of running around when a new expansion comes out. I want these skills to feel more valuable. So, and that's all consecrations for what it's worth as well. I think you could do something similar for Purging Flames. The other one I'm actually really excited about is Wall of Reflection. A trait that makes the Wall of Reflection bigger, higher, and wider. You know, a true big-ass wall that you can defend people from. And I think that would be really interesting, especially in some formats of the game. So the other thing I just mentioned there was wards. If you're not familiar with what those are, that's like here on this hammer. We have the Ring of Warding, right? So, I mean, make this bigger and more pronounced. This is a territory that people can't move through. Well, I want it to feel more impactful. You know, here as well, maybe the whole idea of making things last longer. Maybe that consecration trait could roll into that. You also have the line of warding on staff. You have the ward on the Dragon Hunter's longbow as well. That's one of the rare situations where elite specialization's getting a look in on this. So yeah, I think that could be really fun. That's Sanctity, and it's a classification of skill, affecting a classification of skill that I wish had a little bit more impact. For Warrior, I'm in a very similar position to Guardian. I'm looking at something I wanted to do at launch, and a way that the devs described a weapon at launch that never really came through for me, and that's Longbow. This time we're looking at a whole weapon, not just some utility skills. So I appreciate a lot of raiders and stuff. We've used Longbow in a Condi setup when we're, you know, stacked together hitting a boss's hitbox. What I want is Longbow to feel fun on a power play style, and again for that generic kind of adventuring mood. And it really falls kind of short. So already the trait Crack Shot improves Longbow a little bit with the auto attacks. Well, I want to take a little bit out of the Necromancer's Handbook here. Necro has a trait that completely changes one of the weapon skills. Scepter 3 becomes AoE, right? It upgrades from Feast of Corruption into, I can't remember, some new thing of corruption. And I want to do the same thing here for Longbow. I want to invent a new trait. I'm calling it Siege Artist. And this is how the devs described Longbow at launch, as a siege weapon. You know, a bit like how Revs use hammer in World vs. World. That's what warriors were always meant to be doing with longbows. Big explosions arcing through the sky that you would dodge out of the way of, otherwise they would blow up around your feet. Really cool, big, massive power strikes. And that's what I want to invent. So here we've got this trait, Siege Artist. Gain increased power while wielding a longbow, or that could be gain increased ferocity. That's your choice, whichever one. And Arcing Shot becomes Arcing Blast. With ammunition, again, I think ammunition can improve so many skills so easily. A higher arc on the projectiles. You know, I love this idea of them going really far and high. A bit like how the rocket toolbelt skill works for Engineer, if you guys are familiar with what I'm talking about. And 2 additional projectiles. All right, so I've imagined that in the strongest way possible. But here's what I want. I want when I use this, like, to have not just this AoE here with this little explosion, but like an explosion here and then maybe one here and one here. Yeah, and I get a bit of ammo. And so, you know, we're using a really strong kind of power thing here. Maybe you can do a thing where the further back you're standing, the more time it was in the air, the more damage it did. All of a sudden, all it would take is that for this to feel like a really fun power weapon. You could leave pin down the same, because yeah, it's got the bleed on there, but frankly, the emote would be good to pin someone down into the arcing... what did I call it? Arcing Blast afterwards. You can keep Smoldering Arrow if you like. I do appreciate this is probably one of the weaker elements of the weapon. And yeah, the 1 and the 2 are pretty much adequate. So that's what I want. I want a new longbow trait, and I want to invest in that power play style. They would be so cool, right? Imagine it. Imagine it. Ranger is a pretty loaded class. There's a million different things you could pick and choose from. My instinct originally was to look at traps, maybe. And maybe increase the way that you can play with these outside of Condi builds, or make them a bit more useful for general adventuring. And I do think there's a lot of space there. But really, it's always going to come down to one thing for me when it comes to Ranger, and that's pet balance. That's pet diversity. Look at all the pets. I want to use viably more of these pets. So whatever trait I add has got to be to opening up this matrix a bit more. And here's what I've come up with. It's called Wild Side. It's a beast mastery trait. And it says your commandable pet skills swap to a new variant and gain ammunition. Again, because I think ammunition can bump up a lot of these weaker things. So what do I mean here? Well, let's take, for example, the white mower. Or any kind of mower, as it were. What we can do when we press F2 is the Icy Screech. Screech to chill nearby foes, which is, you know, got its benefits. But if we actually press K and we look at his ability, we've got his auto attack, that's Peck. We've got the one we were commanding. And then what about this here? Harmonic Cry. Heal yourself and nearby allies. Now, you'll see that is a whopping heal. That's a 6,520 heal on a 30-second cooldown. This is a really strong ability. And if you timed that properly, that's epically valuable. The thing is, that's only the AI using that. And you can't control it. So, unfortunately, while some people will use mowers, and we have historically seen that, you know, especially the pink mower combined with their CC bar potential and so on, generally speaking, their usefulness drops a lot. And in fact, some of these abilities in this slot are so strong that when you get them as a Soul Beast, because don't forget Soul Beast does let you use these, they're nerfed. So look at this, Harmonic Cry as a Soul Beast isn't 6k, it's only 1k. Like, ArenaNet had to be careful about this stuff. So what I'm saying with Wild Side is that when you're not merged, I'm not talking about League specialization stuff, just your regular behavior, I want this skill here to swap to this. And that can be true for any number of pets. What it basically means is all the different pets in the game have like a bit of new flavor, a bit of something new going on. So for example, if we look at a Devourer, you're currently getting Poison Barbs, probably a little bit inadequate. After the patch, you'd get the Tail Lash. And if Tail Lash is now a hard CC that you have on F2, and that is immediately way better. If it's still too weak on the F2, well, that's where the ammunition side can come in, and you can really bump just a few more of these up where need be. And I think straight away there, you've got kind of a uniform way of hopefully encouraging some more pet activity and maybe push people away from some of the more overpowered ones. Last but not least, we have Elementalist. Now, given everything I said, you might expect me to be looking at Staff Ellie. And reinstating some of those big, you know, I want to be a backline nuke ideas that I think so many people are looking for. I'm actually not. There's such a long history of that with the studio. What I really want to look at is a classification of utility skills And that's conjure weapons. There's so much weird and broken and iffy about conjure weapons. The ice bow is probably the best example to me. They've got so many mechanics they've dumped in here, like whenever you land an attack, you gain a stack of water arrow, and then you spend the water arrow when you fire again. They've got all these weird interactions, but it's going to run out really soon. You're an Ellie, there's kind of a reliance on you swapping through new skill bars a somewhat regular rate. And look at this, when you're holding an ice bow, you're getting Condi duration? Hello? For what exactly? Not too much. And then when I drop the ice bow, that just goes away. And then, of course, you've got the idea that it's meant to be something fun to share to other people, right? So there's just so much that could be going on. And, I mean, the trait called Conjurer is give people fire auras when they pick these up. Like, they're just throwing stuff at the walls. There's nothing cohesive about any of this. So what I would actually like to do is change Conjurer. I'm not even suggesting a new trait here. I'm kind of suggesting to rebalance this. And I think at least one quick fix here, and maybe this is just a balance to conjure weapons in general, is this. Conjure weapons have ammunition and no cast time. Conjure passive effects linger for a short duration after dropping the weapon. So, let's return to our ice bow. Maybe I just quickly summon it, but I'm not going to use this because when I drop this here, I at least keep the healing power buff. So now when I swap into water and I use various abilities, I'm getting the benefit out of it. Or if I'm on a Condi playstyle, I'm getting the condition duration while actually using more interesting condition applying abilities, right? So that's one thing. Now, the ammunition here is actually really important. By giving conjure weapons ammunition, what you can do, and give them, say, 3, is you can say, right, I want to open this engagement with 1, 2, 3 ice bows or something. And then people can use them, and then, but now you're not going to have any for ages because you've just spent all your cooldowns. I actually think you can play in interesting ways with ammunition on conjure weapons, in as much as sharing them out to other people is a part of these weapons. Now, if that sounds overpowered to you, you think everybody's going to run in there, you know, use Ice Bow 4 and move, then yes, something deeper can be looked at with the weapons themselves. But as a starting point to actually make them a little bit useful, this would mean so much. And just killing the cast time as well, so they're not so clunky to get in and out of. I would love that. And all of a sudden, I would find myself playing with all kinds of new skills, basically new skills, that I don't get to spend enough time with, like the Fiery Eviscerate. This thing's awesome. Let me use it more. So there you have it, guys. That is my little look at a couple of new traits. That's some stuff I think the Balance team could be doing. I don't really know whether they have any ambitions like this. I think the idea that they need to keep implementing new elite specializations kind of means they don't spend time on updates like this. They don't brainstorm when they're at the office about stuff like this, and they certainly don't develop towards stuff like this. But you never know. At other times, before we were in this big End of Dragons crunch phase, we have seen them do fun stuff. Especially, again, I think Necro's had a lot of cool updates that have introduced stuff of about this caliber. And I'd love to see where they go with it. So give me your thoughts. Give me any big bang for your buck traits that you guys can think of. Now, that is what is especially interesting to me. The smallest change you can imagine with the biggest payoff. I really want to see what you guys have got for that. Give me feedback on what I made, and yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one very soon. Thanks, everybody.